Rabbinic history, what went on, what was the science behind it, some of the highlights within regards to it, and we're continuing this series because we've already recorded about various other countries also. At the moment, it's Afghanistan, it's an opportune time. There's a lot of rich Jewish Torah culture, rabbinic culture in the country in of itself. So I thought it's definitely an opportune time to speak about Afghanistan in of itself respectively over here. We just recorded a video on Kurdistan yesterday, we did on Gibraltar quite recently. Now let's explore a bit within regards to Afghanistan in of itself. Now the history of the Afghanistani Jews goes back at least 2,500 years. Ancient Iranian tradition suggests that the Jews settled in Balkh. I believe that's a Zoroastrian and let's say Buddhist stronghold at that specific time. The king of Judah collapsed in 587 before Common Era, leading to this migration. The community obviously is in the complete extinction at the moment, as is well documented. Like for example, I think there was at the time of the large-scale 2021 Taliban offensive, only 2 Jews were still residing in the country. We're going to speak about maybe one of them or 2 of them in due course. One of them is Zablon Simtov, and I think he has a distant cousin, Toba Moradi, I think, as of recent years. I think when the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan was re-established by the Taliban in August 2021, both Simtov and Moradi would make Aliyah, I think in September 2021 and October 2021 respectively, leaving it now completely empty of Afghanistani Jews. Now a branch of Persian Jewry, the overwhelming majority of the Afghan Jewish community today resides obviously in Israel, with a small group, let's say a few hundred living, I believe, in the United States of America and some living in the United Kingdom also respectively. It's interesting, I think in Afghanistan, the Jews had formed a community of leather and karakul merchants, landowners and money lenders. Jewish families mostly lived in the cities naturally of Herat and Kabul, while their patriarchs, let's say, traveled back and forth on trading trips across Central Asia and Iran. They carved their prayers in Hebrew and Aramaic on mountain rocks as they moved between the routes of the Silk Road. Let's explore a bit more with regards to the earlier stage of Afghanistani Jewry. Now there's existing records of Jewish presence in Afghanistan dates back to the 7th century Common Era. Although I think there's ancient Iranian tradition holds that there was a Jewish presence in Afghanistan as early as the time of Israel and Judah, respectively. There are also origin theories that some of the Pashtuns that claim they're descendants of the lost 10 tribes of the Israelites. Now it's actually interesting, the town of Balkh was a major center of Jewish life in ancient Afghanistan. Some Islamic traditions, for example, hold that the Balkh was a burial place of Ezekiel and the home of Jeremiah, both Jewish and Muslim prophets, which is reported over here, just reading Wikipedia here, what they've quoted. Jews also settled in Herat, which was an important location on the Silk Road, as well as other trading routes. I think in more modern times, ruins from the Jewish settlements still exist in the city, including a Jewish cemetery. Now it's reported over there was a 12th century Arab geographer, someone named Muhammad al-Idrisi. He wrote that the city of Kabul had a Jewish quarter, apparently at that stage in time. Now, in 18th century, Jews had served an army of Nidar Shah, I think, settled in Kabul at that point in time. It's reported over. As his treasury guards. In 2011, the Afghan Geniza, and I think that was an 11th century collection of Jewish manuscript fragments that was compiled in Hebrew, Aramaic, Judeo-Arabic, Judeo-Persian, was found in a cave network in Afghanistan. Reported over 29 pages from the collection were purchased by the Jerusalem-based National Library of Israel in 2013. Now we visited the National Library of Israel on this series already. And now let's explore a bit more with regards to the modern era. Following, let's say, Kazakh famine of 1930 to 1933, a significant number of Bukharian Jews crossed the border into the Kingdom of Afghanistan as part of, let's say, a wider famine-related refugee crisis. Leaders of the community petitioned Jewish communities in Europe and the United States of America for support. In total, some 60,000 refugees had fled from Soviet Union and reached Afghanistan. Now, come on, 1932, Mohammad Nadir Shah signed a border treaty with the Soviets in order to prevent asylum seekers from crossing into Afghanistan from Soviet Central Asia. And later that year, Afghanistan began deporting Soviet origin refugees either back to the Soviet Union or to specified territories in China. Now, Soviet Jews who were already present in Afghanistan with intent to flee further south was detained in Kabul, and all Soviet Jews were apprehended at the border, were immediately deported. All Soviet citizens, including, let's say, these Bukharian Jews, were suspected by both Afghan and British government officials of conducting espionage, that's what's reported over, with the intention of disseminate of the Bolshevik propaganda. Now, come what, I think September 1933, many of these Soviet Jewish refugees in North Afghanistan were forcibly relocated to major cities such as Kabul and Herat. But I think they would continue at that point in time to live in under restrictions of work and trade. Whilst I think it had been claimed that in November 1933 there was the assassination of Mohammad Nadir Shah made the situation worse, it's likely to have only limited influence. In 1935, the Jewish Telegraph Agency reported the ghetto rules had imposed on Afghan Jews. What did that require at that point in time? Them to wear particular clothes, requiring Jewish women to stay outside markets, requiring all Jews to live within certain distances from mosques, and banning Jews from riding horses. So you can see anti-Semitism was not just in Europe, it was all over the Asian places also. And this is pre-1948. I think it's reported over in 1935, a delegate to the World Zionist Congress claimed that an estimated 40,000 Bukharian Jews had been killed or starved to death. In mid-1935, riots erupted in Herat, the Afghan city at that point in time with the largest, I think, Jewish population, over a dispute there was between two boys, one Jewish and one Muslim. The two boys got into a fight, this is reported over, for unknown reasons, during which the Muslim boy fell down a flight of stairs. Now the Jewish boy, reported over Abba ben Simon, was blamed. And others began spreading rumors that he was trying to convert the Muslim boy to Judaism. From 1935 to 1941, under Prime Minister Mohammed Hashimi Khan, he was the uncle of the king. And Nazi Germany was the most influential country in Afghanistan at the point in time. The Nazis regarded most Afghans as Aryans. In 1938, it was reported that Jews were allowed to work only as shoe polishers. You can see anti-Semitism at that stage in time was absolutely horrendous. Now there was attempted migrations to India. Now, some Afghan Jews attempted to emigrate to British India, but when they arrived at the border, the colonial authorities categorized from according to their passports. Those with Soviet passports were accused of having Bolshevist ties and denied entry. Many Afghan Jews were deported back to Soviet-controlled territories under the guise of allegedly violating their behavioral conduct codes of British India. Although historians have made note of the fact, I think, that the colonial government's fear that the immigrants would spread socialist ideas among the Indian public and offer, let's say, encouragement to the independence movement, played a much larger part in its decision to deport them. The living conditions of Jews continued to worsen in both Kabul and Herat. Now, it's reported that many Afghan Jews illegally emigrated to British India during the 1940s, during the Second World War. Thousands of Afghanistani Jews at that point in time also emigrated to mandatory Palestine during the war, but most of them emigrated to the State of Israel after it was founded in 1948. Some Afghan Jews also emigrated in the United States of America, most of whom settled in New York City, borough of Queens, over here. Very interesting. So now let's look more post-1948. Now, in 1948 itself, there were over 5,000 Jews in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the only Muslim country which allowed Jewish immigrants to keep their citizenship. Most Afghani Jews moved to Israel or the United States of America. By 1969, at that point in time, approximately 300 Jews remained in Afghanistan, but most of them left Afghanistan after the Soviet invasion in 1979, leaving only 10 Jews in Afghanistan in 1996. Now, most of whom lived in Kabul. Now, currently more than 10,000 Jews of Afghan descent live in Israel. Over 200 Jewish families live in New York. Over 100 Jewish families of Afghan descent live in London. I know some personally in New York and in London. I have to say that on the outset over here. Now, I think there's in other places in the world. Now, by the end of 2004, only 3 known Jews were left in Afghanistan. Zablon Simtov, Isaac Levy, who was born in 1920, and Simtov's cousin Tova Moradi, which we mentioned about before. Now, Levi would rely on outside help, I think, to survive at that point in time. There wasn't a choice. Simtov ran a store selling carpets and jewelry until 2001. They lived on opposite sides of a dilapidated Kabul synagogue, and very interesting enough. Yeah, so that's an interesting story in of itself. I recommend people to learn more about that. Okay, there was... Now, obviously, due to the decades of warfare, anti-Semitism, and extreme religious persecution, there are officially no Jews remaining in Afghanistan today. Now, let's look at especially the remaining synagogues over here. We're not going to look at the other synagogues that weren't Jewish history. Now, the Kabul synagogue that says Zablon Simtov was a caretaker of until his last day in Afghanistan, I think located on District 4 in Kabul, also known as Kosher Gol for the Shisha, I think the florist's alleyway. Simtov's neighbors promised him that they would maintain the synagogue of Kabul in his absence. Let's explore a bit about it. I think it's obviously an abandoned congregation. It was completed, the synagogue, in 1966, when Afghanistan's Jewish population was numbered in thousands. The synagogue fell into despair after the latter half of the 20th century due to the emigration, let's just say, of the country's Jewish population, damage during the second Afghan civil war, and persecution under the Taliban. In early years of the 21st century, the synagogue was home to Zablon Simtov and Yitzhak Levin, believed to be the last two Jews in Afghanistan. Levin died in the synagogue in 2005. Simtov was evacuated from Afghanistan in 2021 after the Taliban takeover. I think in 1948, as was before, Afghan's Jewish population was 5,000. Early 1960s, the community built a synagogue around a small courtyard on Flower Street, downtown Kabul. A two-story building has two sanctuaries dedicated on March 29, 1966. Now, the synagogue's door was made of corrugated iron and laden with stars of David. There's also a Jewish cemetery on the outskirts of the city where 1,000 people are reportedly buried. Now, come what 1960s, much of the Jewish population had emigrated, let's say, for better economic opportunities in the United States of America and Israel, as I said before. And it's interesting, at that time, Afghanistan was the only country in the Muslim world that allowed Jews to retain their citizenship upon emigrating. Now, we talked about this before. I think late 20th century, the country's last rabbi fled in 1988, and the last formal prayer service was held in 1990. And as before, mid-1990s, we see Zablon Simtov once again move into the synagogue at that stage in time, after his home was damaged, I think, during the Second Afghan War. As we said, I think there was a brief stint in the Turkmenistan. Simtov would return to Kabul in 1998 to 1999 and was synagogue's living caretaker, and he would operate a carpet business out of the synagogue also. Very interesting. Now, let's say something about Zablon Simtov. I think he was born in 1959, so he's not that old at the moment. He's in his late 60s. He was obviously a carpet trader and a restaurateur, and we spoke about how when he left in 2021, he was caretaker of the Kabul synagogue, and it's very interesting. He left Afghanistan with the help of a private security company that had been organized by Israeli-American businessman Mordechai Kahana and American Rabbi Moshe Margareten from the Tzedek Association, respectively. He was obviously an Orthodox Jew from Herat, and early life he was in, he was in Herat respectively, and we see that, how the trials he had basically being there. Now, the synagogues in Herat also, let's talk about Herat, obviously major Jewish center in Afghanistan. There were 4 synagogues, I think, apparently, and there was 1 public bath, as well as a Jewish cemetery and several abandoned houses. Now, there was a Yu-Ao synagogue. That was the largest of synagogues. I think it still exists in Herat, in western Afghanistan. It is a disused synagogue currently, which still has most of its original characteristics. I think it's a synagogue composed of 3 floors, a main congregation room, several side rooms and corridors, as well as 7 domes of different sizes. The Yu-Ao synagogue underwent renovation in recent years and is also added to Herat's list of protected cultural sites. Now, there was a second synagogue over there called the Gulkiya synagogue. It was converted into a mosque, and today it continues to be used as a Balal mosque currently. Despite the takeover of synagogue of the synagogue, its structure and design have not changed, and the building undergone renovation in recent years. The synagogue's mikveh, the ritual bath, obviously fallen into disrepair. As a result, it's no longer accessible to the public. The third synagogue is the Shemayel synagogue, which was converted to an elementary school. Has been renovated in recent years. The fourth synagogue was called the Mula Ashura synagogue, located with Herat's historic bazaar, has been left, I think, abandoned. As a result, it is in a state of disrepair. The Jewish public bath also remains abandoned, and building is also in need of urgent renovation in order to prevent its complete destruction. The bath was operational in Herat's bazaar until 2018. Reported over, there's also a small Jewish cemetery in Herat. Some of the tombstones have information about deceased persons, which is written on them in Hebrew. In recent years, some of the tombstones and the wall which surrounds the cemetery have been repaired thanks to donations which were sent by Afghan Jewish community which lives in the state of Israel. Before the fall of the government of Afghan Islamic Republic to the Taliban, Herat's cultural officials stated that at the time of forced departure of the Herati Jews, on a stone inscription, the community stated that it had transferred the responsibility of caring for the synagogues, the public bath, and the cemetery to the government which ruled Afghanistan when the inscription was written. The state of these historic buildings and the Taliban's plans, let's just say, for them have remained unknown since Afghanistan fell into Islamic, let's say, group which has terrorized religious minorities in the past. Let's say now the U'al synagogue over here. Now that was an abandoned, let's speak about that for a minute. Obviously abandoned Orthodox Jewish congregation. It's located, I believe, in the Momanda neighborhood of the old city of Herat in western Afghanistan. The area was once known as I'd say it in Arabic, Mahalayi Musahaya. I hope I pronounced it correctly, or the neighborhood of the Jews. It's only synagogue in Herat that has been preserved with most of its original characteristics, although it's currently in a state of disrepair. Now, I think there's no definitive date of construction of the synagogue. When Israel was founded in 1948, the estimated 280 Jewish families that lived in Herat began leaving. As of 2021, there were no Jews in Afghanistan. In 2020, Al Jazeera reported that part of the complex was restored by the local government in 2009. It is the only synagogue in Herat that has been preserved with most of its original features. Although I think badly damaged, it was recently converted into an infant school. And there are three other synagogues as mentioned before in Herat also, respectively, which you spoke about their tradition. I think in October 22, if I'm not mistaken, Taliban-run Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan announced a 16-month project to prevent the synagogue's structural collapse and to rehabilitate the company's mikveh. Most of the 500,000 costs is being funded by the Alif Foundation, reported over. Now, the other facts with regards to Afghanistani Jews, we know that many of the scholars believe the arrival of Afghanistan after the Babylonian exile, when Jews were dispersed throughout the Persian Empire. Now, the Megillat Esther, the Book of Esther, describes the Persian Empire as spanning 127 provinces, which may have included parts of Afghanistan. Since Afghanistan was part of the Khorasan kingdom under the Achaemenid Empire, it's likely that Jews were living there during the time of the Purim story. Archaeological finds with Hebrew inscriptions and strong oral traditions indicate that Jewish life once thrived in Balkh and Samarkand. That's one thing. Now, a famous medieval traveler obviously mentions Afghanistan. We'll mention him in the Kurdistani video also, history video. There was a 12th century traveler, Rabbi Benjamin of Tudela. He was a Jewish traveler from Spain, documented Jewish communities across the Middle East and Asia. He noted a Jewish population in Ghazna, modern-day Ghazni, reflecting the vibrant Jewish presence during medieval times. Now, interesting, Afghanistan Jews welcomed refugees from Persia and Bukhara. This is another interesting. Now, there was a major wave, as we said before, of Jewish immigration to Afghanistan, which occurred in 1839, when the Mashhad Jews of Persia, somewhere I also descend from, were forced to convert to Islam under a fundamentalist Shia regime. Many of these converters fled to Herat, a Jewish hub near the border, where they were able to openly return to Jewish practice. In the early 20th century, Jews of Russia and Bukhara also fled Afghanistan to escape persecution. Each group brought its own customs, minhagim, language, dialects, and food traditions, adding to the tapestry of Afghani Jewry. Again, I think by late 1800s, Herat and Kabul were obviously, as we said before, home to most of Afghanistani Jews. We mentioned about the 4 synagogues Herat had. There was, at that point in time, obviously a Jewish cemetery. There was community schools teaching Torah and Hebrew and Persian languages. The Jewish community in Kabul was more modernized at that point in time. Jews that over there worked in trade, carpet, weaving, herbal medicine, goldsmithing, contributing significantly to local economy. I don't know if the Alliance school system had opened up in Afghanistan so much, or to what degree if it did open up, but that's interesting in itself. We actually recorded a video on some different school systems in those places. Now, despite their contributions, Jews in Afghanistan often faced discrimination. They were sometimes confined to Jewish-only neighborhoods, mahallas as they're called, subject to strict dress codes, as we said before. They were barred from certain professions. Warring factions caused further turmoil in the region, while the Jews inevitably were caught in the middle. In 1857, the Persian forces invaded Herat and expelled the Mashhadi Jews from their homes. They were imprisoned in poor conditions. They were imprisoned and faced illness and hunger. It would take 2 years before the survivors were allowed to return to their homes. Now, obviously, as Zionism, Israel was always in their hearts. Afghan Jews maintained strong spiritual ties to the land of Israel. They regularly contributed to the Halukah charity funds, supporting Jews in Jerusalem and Tzfat. Shluchei Rabbanan will come maybe to Afghanistan from the holy cities of Israel, which we speak about a lot in this series. I think beginning in the late 19th century, some began making Aliyah, mostly settling obviously in Jerusalem's Bukharian quarter, which we've spoken about before. Come what 1950, after the founding of Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, the majority of Afghan Jews had made Aliyah, fulfilling a long-held belief that Jews belong in the ancestral home. Now it's interesting, there's obviously strong tie in bonds. The Afghan Jews were part of a broader Judeo-Persian culture sphere. They shared language, Judeo-Persian and Judeo-Tajik, foods, religious customs, and even liturgical texts, tafsir, with Jewish communities in Iran, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. Cross-border marriages were common, and communal leaders often collaborated on religious and financial matters. In Jerusalem, Afghan, Persian, and Bukharian Jews continued to live together, marry each other, and attend and shared yeshivot over there, interesting enough. Now, it's interesting, another thing that Afghan Jews are famous for are the kids-created personal Torah notebooks. One of the most unique Afghan Jewish traditions was the dastak. It was a handmade Hebrew learning notebook created by children. These colourful illustrated books were both educational and artistic, often featuring religious poetry and biblical verses. Some dastaks survive today in private collections and museums. Now, it's actually interesting. In Afghan cuisine also, another side point, they always put a Jewish spin to it. Now it's interesting, Afghan Jewish food combines kosher dietary laws with local flavors. Now Shabbat meals obviously featured pulao Shabbati, slow-cooked rice, and let's say a meat dish inspired by the national dish, Kabuli pulao. Other favorites include gondi, this is also Persian, spice meatballs, Persian style, one I grew up with that also. Shalo asanzi, green and rice, and ashak, leek dumplings, let's just say. Food played a central role in Jewish holidays, especially in Purim foods, lamb on Pesach, for example, and Tu B'Shvat, fruit platters in of itself. Come on, I think the early 2010s, researchers uncovered the Afghan Geniza, a treasure trove, let's say, of Jewish manuscripts hidden in caves of Bamiyan. These documents date from the 11th and 13th centuries, including legal texts, biblical commentaries, personal letters, in Hebrew, Judeo-Arabic, and Judeo-Persian. Among the discovered treasuries was Afghan Siddur, possibly the oldest known Hebrew prayer book, dating to the 8th or 9th century. Very interesting enough. So that's another interesting tidbit also over here. I mean, these extra tidbits which I'm just relating over these past few minutes, I've taken from the Chabad website, actually interesting enough. Now there's the Pashtun's mysterious origin. What's that? Some traditions suggest that the Pashtuns, they were Afghanistan's largest ethnic group, maybe descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. This theory, I think, is based on an oral tradition of Pashtun elders and shared customs. They point to parallels such as Yibum, Levirate marriages, lighting candles on Friday nights, tribal names resembling those of ancient Israel. For example, Yus, Ufsai, sons of Yosef, Rabbani, Reuben, Gorji, Gad, and Afridi, Ephraim, circumcision of boys of young age, resting on Shabbat, for example, and not like Friday, like other Muslims, eating their own slaughtered meat and not eating camel meat, not shaving their beards and sideburns. That's another factor over here. Wearing, let's say, a shawl, let's say, resembling a talit. However, many are skeptical, and the theory remains a subject of debate in regards to that. Now, there was unique, I think, Afghanistani Jewish traditions on various different festivals. For example, on Shavuot, it was known as Festival of Flowers, obviously, Chag Moed Gol. During the Torah reading, congregants stood in two lines and showered the Torah scroll with the rose petals based on the Midrash about Mount Sinai blooming with flowers. The Shabbat Sachor, another famous time, is celebrated with decorated eggs, playful egg-breaking challenge, accompanied by the chant of destroying the remembrance of Amalek, do not forget. Also Torah education. Boys and girls were taught Torah from a young age in private Jewish schools called Chamulas. Girls were especially, let's just say, educated in laws of kashrut, including the detailed preparation of nikur, let's say, removal of forbidden fats and veins, kosher meat, baking matzah, and so on. So that is very, very interesting also. So obviously we know that Afghanistani Jewish communities, they thrive in Israel. It's interesting. There's communities here in Jerusalem, in Bet Shemesh, where I'm recording from, and also in Bnei Brak, also New York, Los Angeles, London, and there's still like a great amount of Afghanistani heritage that is identified. I think this Chabad website will be Rabbi Dr. Zablon Simtov would actually contribute to some of those tidbits over there. Now, there were three waves, I think, of immigration of Afghanistan Jews to Eretz Yisrael. I think the first group was between 1882 to 1914. This was end of 19th century starting. I think they joined immigrants. I think they built Bukhara and Mashhad neighborhoods in Jerusalem, synagogues over there. And the route of Afghanistan, I think they would come to Eretz Yisrael. They would travel through Russia, Odessa, Turkey. And I think the motives was religious at that point in time. There was a love of, obviously, Eretz Yisrael. Zionism was thriving all over the world at that point in time. And that was a place of renewal of Jewish life at that point in time. There was a second wave of immigration from Afghanistan, I believe reported over between 1933 to 1939. I think they would go through the northern route. And I think they went through Bombay, Karachi, Peshawar, various other places, also Basra, I think through the Persian Gulf, through Iraq, to Syria, Lebanon. I think they will go through at that point in time, and there was a lot of problems also coming in at that point in time, where they allowed in or not. During this wave of Aliyah, there was a lot of huge anti-Semitism at another point in time. Now, the third wave of immigration, like many of them, will happen in June 1950, where they allowed, I think, a few hundred Afghanistani Jews to leave Afghanistan, and each month there was an arrival of Jews in Israel. And I think, then that will be another wave over there. Let's explore some of the great rabbis of Afghanistan now over here. I think that's very important in the series. A more recent rabbi was Rabbi Tzvi Siman Tov, very famous rabbi. I think he was the chief rabbi of the Jews of Afghanistan in Eretz Yisrael. And he was born in 1934. He passed away on the 10th of February 2022. He was about 88 years of age. Yud Aleph Adar happened to be his Hiluya, actually. So he passed away about 3.5 years ago. He would become a Rosh Kollel, a Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, respectively. He would be living in Bnei Brak, and his rabbis were Rabbi Ezra Atiyah and the Brisk Harav, the Rabbi of Brisk. Interesting. He would have great time with him, including Rabbi Chaim Rabbi, Rav Natan ben Snyor, Rav Eliyahu Bar Shalom, Rav Yaron Navon, Harav Amnon Sabag, Rav Shimon Asher, Rav Yigal. Very some great rabbis. He would be the rabbi of Rabbi Nissim Rabbi, Harav Avram Yonah, respectively. Let's explore a bit with regards to him. He was actually born in Afghanistan. His father was Rabbi Yisachar, and his mother was Rabbinit Rivka. He would actually make Aliyah at a very young age, only 5 years of age. He learned in the famous Talmud Torah, Bnei Tzion, under the auspices of Rabbi Yosef Shrabani, Rabbi Yaakov Bloy. And I think over there, we've spoken about this yeshiva before. I think he would learn in Yeshiva Mekor Chaim of Rabbi Aaron Torchio, and the Brisker Rav also he would learn under. And I think eventually he would actually go on to learn in the bastion of the Sephardic Yeshiva Porat Yosef. under Rav Ezra Atiyah at that point in time. And I think he'll be sent to become an educator over there. It would be Rav Ezra Atiyah, I think, would encourage him to really strengthen the Sephardi community in Bnei Brak and found a yeshiva called the Ora Torah, along with Rabbi David Milinovsky, I believe. I think it would stand for many years. He would be the Rosh Yeshiva there, Rosh Kollel, among the Dayanim over there, the judges in of itself. A really, really great rabbi of the Jewish community of Afghanistan over there at that point in time. And he'll be the head of a Beit Midrash also in the Torah of Netiv Ben Yamin Yerushalayim, and so on and so forth. I think he would work as a Shimush Karosh Kibbutz in Yeshivat Chazon Ovadia, if I'm not mistaken. And Chamiva Yaharab Yitzchak Ochana, Rabbi Shel Kiryat Shmoneh, very interesting answer. A close relationship with Rabbi Yitzchak Ochana marriage-wise. I think he was the gis of Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Hillel, also if I'm not mistaken, brother-in-law, but I'll have to double check that. The Rosh, obviously, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Hillel is the head of Herat Avat Shalom, also respectively. That's what I'm talking about. That's interesting. His son, it happens to be Rabbi Yaakov Ezra Simantov. That's his son, who we're speaking about. He's a rabbi of the Kehilat Noam, I believe. Interesting enough. Maybe a part of Italy, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Rabbi Aaron Yosef Simantov has a prominent position in the Beit Midrash of Netiv Ben Yamin also. And Rabbi Tzvi Simantov, I think, passed away on the 10th of February, 2022, respectively. And so we were speaking over here about he was a head rabbi of the Afghanistani community in Israel, Rabbi Tzvi Simantov. Now, let's explore a few more rabbis from Afghanistan now over here. Another famous Afghanistani rabbi is the famous Rabbi Mati Gorji. Okay, who was he? He lived between 1842 to 1917. He passed away in November 1917. And much can be said within regards to Rabbi Mati Gorji over here, respectively, also. Remember, friends, anyone tuning in, we are exploring the life over here of some of the greater the community of Afghanistan, and now we are speaking about some of the great rabbis that actually hailed from Afghanistan, respectively. Now, Rabbi Mati Gorji, who was he? He lived between 1842 and he passed away in 1917. He was actually born in Herat in Jerusalem, and he passed away in Herat in Afghanistan. He passed away in Jerusalem. He was a posek, he was a Parshan Mikra. He was one of the great rabbis from Afghanistan at this point in time. I think he would make Aliyah way later on in his life, when he was in his 60s, 64 he was, in 1906, with his family to live in Jerusalem. Let's speak a bit about Rabbi Mati who's probably one of the most famous Afghanistani rabbis. He was actually born, I think Rav Mordechai Gorji was his father and Rabbinic was his mother. He was born in Herat, and they were a family of Rabbanim, I think from the Manusei, Mashad, respectively. And we've spoken about that on various occasions we did a video on he will become a darshan, he will become an educator for the Jewish community in Herat, also respectively, a prominent one. He will become the leader of the Jewish congregation over there, and in Herat also, really doing huge amounts. And there was a lot of Chashuv Rabbanim at that point in time, and there was correspondence with great, let's just say, Persian rabbis. I think he was given the title of a mullah. Also interesting, I'd like the Persians to be given. 1896, Rav Gorji and his son Rabbi Asher Gorji, I think will go to Jerusalem at that point in time from Afghanistan. They'll be traveling, and eventually they would go in 1906 to make Aliyah in Eretz Israel. They would live in the Bukharian neighborhood over there in Jerusalem. 1908, he was appointed, if I'm not mistaken, the Rav Rashi, the chief rabbi of the Bukharian congregation and Afghanistani congregation in Jerusalem. A very prominent position this happened to be. And that's very, very interesting. He would write various different great books, including Tehilot David, which would have various different drashot on the book of Tehillim, and the Sefer Beit Mikdash, also very interesting. Now, this is another book. This was on the Parshanot ala Mishnah, and there was also a Sefer called Oneg LeShabbat also, which was also a very, very important book. And a book that was on the Nevi'im also, respectively. And I think the Oneg Shabbat book was divided into 3 sections also, respectively. And that's very, very interesting. I think another book would be, maybe a printing of the book would be printed in 2010, way after he passed away, if I'm not mistaken. So that's 2 famous books. The Oneg Shabbat was printed in Jerusalem,
and I think the Korot Zmanim, Rabbi Mati Gorji, Afghanistan, was printed, I think through Reuven Kashani in 1970 in Jerusalem. They passed away in 1917, and it's very interesting. Rabbi Asher Gorji will go on to become a great rabbi also, I believe, in Israel. Let's speak about Reuven Kashani now, just for a minute. Who was he? He's a famous person. I think he's still alive, if I'm not mistaken. He was born in the year 1926. He'll become a sofer, an author. He'll become a historian, a journalist. He was a president of the Afghanistani community, I believe, of the Jews from Afghanistan, and was part of the Sephardic committee in Jerusalem. He was actually born in Herat in Afghanistan, and when he was at a young age, he would, I think he would actually move to Eretz Israel, as we stated before. So they're very interesting. Let's speak a bit with regards to Reuven Kashani over here, because he's another, let's say, very important Afghanistani figure over here. I'm just going to go to another quiet corner at the moment so we can just speak better. I like to record all these different videos we do in different locations, and me having ADHD, we enjoy doing that, so we'll have a bit of fresh air over here. Okay, so friends, we're speaking now about Reuven Kashani, a famous historian. I think he was born in Herat also in Afghanistan. He was born in, and he came from great family heritage. Yaakov was his father, Yaakov Kashani, his mother was Rivka. I think they came from the houses, his mother came from the house of Simtov also, once again, so it was a famous family. Now, when he was 8 years of age, the family, I think, they embarked on a trip to Jerusalem. Very interesting enough. I think it would take 6 months to get to Jerusalem, and they would actually go to India. They would go to Iraq and Syria, through Hodu, Iraq, and Damascus, respectively. And eventually they would arrive in Jerusalem in 1935. Come what 1950, I think Rav I don't think he was a rabbi. He was president, obviously, an important position. He would get married to Michal from the Aronov family, I believe. Interesting enough. So that's very interesting. I think they would have 4 daughters and grandchildren and grandchildren also, if I'm not mistaken. He wrote lots of historical books, including the book on Yerushalayim, history with regards to it. Of the different generations, history of the different generations. That was printed, I believe, in the year 1968. Then there was a Yehudot Bukhara he would write on in 1973. Yehudei Afghanistan, the Jews of Afghanistan. That was printed in 1975. The Kahilot Yehudim Turkey he would write about. That was printed in 1978. The Congregation of the Jews in Iran. That was printed in 1980. We'll talk about the Haflashim, the Korot, Masorot, Minhagim. Also Kahilat Yehudim Behodu, about them, the various different Sephardic congregations. Yudei Pras, that was printed in 2001. Also about Afghanistan. The Aseret HaShvatim, he would write a book on the 10 tribes, 2004. Marot Yerushalayim in 2005, and other books also, which you have to point out. Another famous, let's say, historian from Afghanistan is a man named Yitzchak Betzalel, who was born in the year 1931. He passed away in 2018. He was also let's say, an investigator, historian. He was one of the, I think he was heading the Yad Ben Tzvi Institute itself. He was also born in Herat, in Afghanistan. He passed away in Hadera in Jerusalem. He would learn in for example, Tel Aviv University, in the Hebrew University in Jerusalem also. He will win various prizes also in Israel, respectively. I think he would take on various different importances as a journalist. He was very famous, I think, all over the place, especially in Israel. I think when he was, so he's another key person at that point in time. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he joined the Israeli army during the Independence War in 1948, for example, and will go on to learn in all these different academic institutions, universities in Israel. He would write various different books. He'll be an author of famous Afghanistani honor. Hakol Katub B'Sefer. This was printed in 1969. Levadam Mematzeh Haketz. This was 1976. There was another book, Eretz Avot Shel Taliban, a book on Taliban, 2016. Begisha Imam Mizrach. This was connected to Yitzhak Ben Tzvi. This was printed in 2017, and several other books in between, before those periods also. So that's something we had to point out. Now, another famous rabbi, Rabbi Benjamin Gorji. Another famous rabbi we've spoken about here inside this series. He happened to be from the famous Gorji family, and he was a great rabbi over there. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he passed away on the 6th of Tishrei. I'm not too sure the exact year he passed away. He was a great rabbi there. He was a man of kindness over there. He would do a huge amount of outreach work, kiruv work. He would really strengthen Torah. He was an educator, and I think he was part of the Benetzion Talmud Torah also, respectively. He would give over various different Grand Juris Torah classes, especially to the Afghanistani Jewish community over there. Many of the older people in the community would come. The younger people would come. The Bale Batim, the people that are working, the Talmidei Chachamim, they would all come to him. And he was seen as a great rabbi. I think he had a connection with Chacham Ovadia Yosef, if I'm not mistaken. And he would really do the midat chesed of itself. The characteristics of kindness was absolutely phenomenal in of itself. He was just really a man of congregation in of itself. It says Rabbi Benjamin Zachav Yizkeh et Rabim Bekana et Olamo. He was a very great rabbi. There's actually the Afghanistani Jewry in Israel and diaspora. They've got a special website which I think is in Hebrew and English, which I reckon. There's a famous photographer named Meir Betzalel, who happens to be the son of Yecheskel and Yedidia Betzalel. He was a photographer in Afghan community from 1930s to early 1950s. He immigrated to Israel in 1924 to Jerusalem. He would study in the Talmud Torah, Bnei Tzion. Very interesting enough, a Talmud Torah we've spoken about on various occasions before. And he photographed, interesting enough, Meir Betzalel, many of the community members and immortalized major and colorful events from that time. Now, it's interesting, his unique collection, Meir Betzalel's one, of photographs was donated to the Ben Tzvi Institute for conversion by his relative, I think someone named Chaim Yekutiel. Now, thanks to Moshe and Yoram Betzalel, they prepared various articles for this specific website, which I spoke about, interestingly enough. So, and he chronicles many things over. Now, it's interesting, there was another famous rabbi, Rabbi Yosef Gorji, who was from Afghanistan. He was a son of, obviously, Rabbi Mullah Matityahu Gorji. It's actually interesting, Mullah Matitya, will give him his title of Mullah. He wrote a chronicle of the Afghan Jewish community in Herat, in the chronicle of his times. Obviously, as we stated before, he immigrated to Israel in 1906 and died in 1917. His son, Rabbi Yosef Gorji, succeeded him as the community's rabbi. At that time, the community did not have a synagogue in which to pray, and they prayed in other synagogues, mainly in Arbalim synagogues on the famous Sonnenfeld Street. That's what we have to point out also. Now, I think there's a story that's said over that on the anniversary of his father's passing, when on the Hilula of Mullah Matitya Gorji, the great rabbi who we spoken about before, when he passed away in 1917, Rabbi Yosef Gorji wanted to buy a mephiter for an aliyah of the Torah in his memory, and the Babylonian community did not allow him and gave the mephiter to someone from the community. This upset, obviously, the community members who could not let this, let's say, pass. So the great-grandfather that is quoted in this article in the Afghani Jewry in Israel and Diaspora website over here, Moshe ben Shimon Betzalel, who had the title the Musta'chan, was, I think, a tax collector and a public servant, could not console himself for, let's say, this injustice that was done, and took some sort of action. And several notables of the community sent letters and emissaries to the donors for the communities near and far to collect donations for the establishment of a synagogue for the Afghani community. That's how the synagogue would actually, maybe you could say some of the roots, it probably might have started anyway. Indeed, the efforts of many important people came in at that point in time. And let's just say, of important people in 1936, they would purchase a property on 29th Reichman Street in Beit Yisrael neighborhood. The building itself was founded in 1936, and there's a stone plaque at the entrance of the building. The building that was purchased had 2 large rooms, and its ceilings were vaulted in the style of the period. Now, a noteworthy detail was the thickness of the walls, which was close to 1 meter. I think Yossi Betzalel would testify for this. Now, the congregation obviously was praying in this building for more than a decade. Also featured is a marble memorial plaque in the synagogue that was craved, I think, in 1910. Interesting enough, also, that's what we have to point out. And the synagogue served as a prayer house in the old building until it was demolished in 1950 and rebuilt. The first part of the memorial plaque is dedicated in memory of those involved in the work, the acquisition of the property, people who made efforts in fundraising and in recruiting people, and the funds of, obviously, the head by Moshe ben Shimon Betzalel. There's a second part of the memorial plaque, sparks the rebuilding of the place in 1950, dedicated to members of the community who were involved in the construction and erection of the new 2-story building at that point in time, which you also have to point out, including there were famous people, Afghanistani Jews, Mr. Yosef Elias, Mr. Shalom Dadash, and others also. Now the memorial plaque, I believe, is located in the Yeshua Ve'Rachamim Synagogue on the 2nd floor also. Now there's famous Arbalim Synagogue on Sonnenfeld Street in Jerusalem, another Afghanistani stronghold, somewhere we visited on this channel before, which I have to point out. And I think the stone plaque at the entrance of the Yeshua Ve'Rachamim Synagogue indicates the construction of the building in 1858. That's very interesting enough. And so Moshe ben Shimon Betzalel Musachan, tax collector, was another famous person, obviously, from the place itself. And the Mr. Betzalel, who we mentioned about before, took a lot of photographs of all these different places in of itself. Now, this synagogue, I think, is located, as I said before, in Beit Yisrael neighborhood, adjacent to the Bukharian neighborhoods in Jerusalem. Most of the Afghani community lived in Israel, especially in 1930s, 1950s. The synagogue, I think, is located on 29 Reichman Street. And the main gabbai is, I'm not too sure currently now, but was Mr. Raphael, was Jerusalem Bakshi, if I'm not mistaken, served as chairman of the Afghanistani Jewish Committee. And the community rabbi, let's say, it was Rabbi Tzvi Simantov, as mentioned before. Now, the synagogue building, as I said, was founded in 1930, and the founders were from the Mitzpalelim of the synagogue were from Herat, mostly in Afghanistan. Ben Tzvi Yoshua, another famous Afghanistani, would actually testify in his book Israel Deportees in Afghanistan and Enslaved Mashhad in Iran. Several of the Afghan immigrants, they were mainly members of families of the Elias, the Cohen family, Betzalel, Kashani, Herati, and the Gol families. They were wealthy and they built and purchased large houses with magnificent courtyards in the center, mainly, especially in the Bukharian neighborhoods, in Beit Yisrael neighborhoods, in Kerem Abram. I think in 1927, the community numbered 327, an Afghan community in Jerusalem would continue to grow at that point in time, as we've spoken about before. Actually boomed several years before the establishment of Yeshua Ve'Rachamim Synagogue. A congregation of worshippers, mainly from the city of Herat, was founded in the Zborov courtyard in Sonnenfeld Street, obviously later Beit Yisrael neighborhood, and this congregation became the Arbalim Synagogue, I think, come 1934. Also known as IRA, Afghanistani Youth Organization, was established over there at that point in time. And one of the organization's first activities was the establishment of the synagogue, the Yeshua Ve'Rachamim Synagogue. And in 1936, the youth of the community would also establish, let's just say, in Jerusalem, the Friends Loan Fund also, which gave its members interest-free loans, like say a gemach over there, against collateral. Rabbi Benjamin Gorji would later become the rabbi of the community in Jerusalem. He was elected chairman due to his great scholarly. He was a Talmud Chacham and active, and he had great personality. Our family background was phenomenal. And Rabbi Yosef Elias was elected the secretary due to he had great involvement in community and affairs of the synagogue. And it's interesting, in 1960, the synagogue was renovated and decorated with symbols of 12 tribes by the Ger HaTzedek Gershon Kochabi. It's reported over there. I think at the end of 2014, more recently, the synagogue was thoroughly renovated. The entrance, the ground floor, was expanded in preparation for the establishment of a library for ancient books, and brought to land from Herat. And when the phase of renovation, I think, was complete, or has been completed, or is processed, I'm not so sure if it has, I think the women's shelter on the upper floor will be renovated. Maybe it was. This article I'm reading from was probably written some years back, probably about 10 years ago of itself, respectively. And much more can be stated within regards to it. The Yeshua Rachamim Synagogue also serves as a Beit Midrash, and there's also a Nativ Benyamin Kollel named after Rabbi Benjamin Gorji over there, a great rabbi. The president of the Kollel, obviously Rabbi Tzvi Simantov, very interesting enough. And they have Netz Minyan, Kabbalat Shabbat, Tefillot, all throughout the day and through Shabbat, and in of itself all throughout the week. Let's say a bit more with regards to Rabbi Yosef Gorji, also another great rabbi from the Gorji family. He lived between 1869 to 1937. His Hilula is on the 6th of Kislev. Now, he came from great auspices. His father obviously was Rabbi Matityahu, we mentioned before, and his mother's name was Rabbinit Shoshana, born 1869 in Herat in Afghanistan, who would learn Torah through his father, Rabbi Matityahu. Obviously, he was a rabbi of Herat, which we mentioned about before. Now, Rabbi Yosef Gorji would go on to become an expert with regards to learning Torah, Benigla Benistar. He was a great rabbi giving over Quran Torah sermons. He was a mohel, a rabbi that would perform circumcision. He was a shochet, kosher slaughterer, a chazan. And he would work in trade also, I believe, also reported that in 1903 he would actually, I think, come to try and embark on a journey to Eretz Israel. And I think he would then become the rabbi of the Bukharian neighborhood over there. And there was a big, large Jewish community over there at that stage in time. 1911, I think, after several years after coming to Eretz Israel with his father, or maybe 3 years later, he will actually come to Eretz Israel. And at that point in time, the community was obviously increasing inside, especially the Bukharian neighborhood of Afghanistani Jews and Bukharian Jews. And he would continue working as a mohel over there, performing Brit Milot over there, circumcisions. He was doing various different important mitzvah missions also over there, helping the poor and really teaching Torah in of itself, and giving over Grand Torah sermons to many people, mitzchazek, let's just say the people, the youth in the community, the children in the community, and there was also a large Persian community assembling there, especially not just the Bukharian communities and Afghanistani. But he passed away, I think it was Erev Shabbat, in 1937, in the Vav Kislev itself, respectively. He wrote a famous book, Rav Yosef did, called Eidut B'Yahosa. This was Perushim and Drashot on the book of Tehillim, Psalms. And I think it would come out in Jerusalem in the year 1926. And in his memory, a Beit Midrash called the Tiferet Yosef in the Bukhari neighborhood was established in Jerusalem. Now, another great rabbi was a rabbi named Rabbi Simcha Efrati, once again from Afghanistan. He lived between the years 1888 to 1973. His Hilul actually is just before Pesach in Yud Gimel Nisan. I think we recorded a video with in regards to him. So he came once again from great rabbinic auspices. I think his father was Rav Ephraim, his mother was Rabbinit Rivka. He was once again born in Herat in Afghanistan. And I think sadly his father passed away while he was at a young age. And I think when he was 4 years of age, he would learn Torah on the auspices of his father, who was another great rabbi, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Mullah. And he would also learn Torah under the auspices of Rabbi Mati Gorji. And he would be ordained to the rabbinate. He would become a shochet once again, a bodek. He would work. Also, I think he was working in trade also, various different types in the fabrics industry, and maybe working in buildings also. Rav Simcha and Mullah Efrati, he would get married. I think his wife was Rabbinit Zilpa, if I'm not mistaken. They would have 6 children, it's reported over. And so very interesting. Eventually, I think he'd come to Israel. He was always praising, let's just say, the wonders of Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. And always, obviously, he yearned to come to Eretz Israel. Eventually, he would at that point in time. And I think Rav Asher Gorji was a very prominent rabbi when he came eventually. So I think in 1951, if I'm not mistaken, he would make Aliyah to Eretz Israel. He would live in various neighborhoods over there. I think eventually in Jerusalem, he would be working as a shochet, performing kosher slaughter there. He would be working, I think, in Melechet HaBinyan also, and taking on various different importances in of itself. Now, he would really give over Grand Torah sermons also to many people on Torah and Musar, and many of the drashot, I think, were printed, if I'm not mistaken, and it was part of a basis of the Or Simcha book, if I'm not mistaken, which we'll have to speak about also. So he really was a famous rabbi. Now, I think he passed away in 1973 on the 13th of Nisan. It happened to be on that specific time in of itself. Now, it's interesting. He would have a son called Sasson Efrati, and who was also, I think, born in 1934. That was the son of Mullah Simcha Efrati, who we just spoke about. He obviously was 17 when he emigrated to Israel. Sasson Efrati would get married to Sarah from the Parnas family, a 17th generation in Jerusalem. She was a granddaughter of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Levi, famous Abed Din of Jerusalem, and her uncle was Rabbi Eliyahu Pardes, who was a rabbi of Jerusalem, interesting enough. Now, Sasson and Sarah would have 3 children, I think, and he was a prominent person, let's just say, in of itself. And Sasson would actually complete a writing from the poppy fields of Afghanistan to Jerusalem. He would actually chronicle this over, so he became also another famous historian over here. So that's very, very interesting. We've spoken over here about many of the great rabbis that actually hailed from Afghanistan over here of yesteryear, here inside this special edition over here. The historians, we've spoken about some of them, famous painters. We've explored over here in this special edition the different synagogues there were and the history behind, let's say, this community, which has such great culture and such a rich heritage also. So it's very interesting. And what were the different traditions the community had in of itself all throughout the different history. Now, thank God we've all got you all watching at this stage in time the video. We are community here. We are learning about great rabbis of yesteryear here on this series. Let's spend a few minutes. First of all, everyone watching at the moment, please subscribe to the channel. You won't regret it. We've got packed with so much Jewish wisdom and rich Oriental Jewish culture. Very, very few English-speaking channels over here would speak about the history of Oriental Jewry, especially here. We're in 2025, so we are one of few at the moment. We're exploring the history of great rabbis of yesteryear from the various different Oriental countries, Ottoman countries, Israel, through North Africa, through Asia. So please look at the stories of Tzaddikim section and learn about the great Chachamim, rabbis of yesteryear, wise people. Now the new project, what we're doing, as you can see at the moment, we're exploring the Jewish history from various different countries. We spoke about Kurdistan yesterday, today Afghanistan. We covered Croatia, Serbia, India, Singapore. We've spoken about Bosnia, various other countries also. We're going to try and explore all the countries, if possible, also. So please, that's another reason to subscribe. Now, on this channel also, we're exploring what were the great yeshivot that were about in different countries. Well, that's another thing that we're trying to target at the moment. Which yeshivot were there? Which countries was there? The great Sephardi yeshivot we're concentrating on. What was a good school system, especially in Israel? Sephardi school systems where the great people, you say, learned and were educated and imbued in Torah. That's another project that we're working on at the moment. And more, actually, importance that we're doing at the moment is just learning and getting good breadth with regards to what happened in all the Oriental countries that we're in. So that's another reason to subscribe. It's for free. We're nearing a staggering 7,500 subscribers, which is an absolute phenomenal achievement. Now, another thing that we're doing on this channel at the moment is we get another great rabbinic personality here in modern day. We've already recorded with about nearly 500 great rabbis here in Israel and all over the diaspora. We get a burst of wisdom every single day. If you look at the channel, you can get energized your day in regards to a bit of wisdom also. We also do a daily Talmud tidbit clip on the daily page of Gemara, daily page of the Daf Yomi. We also record tours all over Israel. We look at the archaeology of Israel, the different sites here in Israel, and explore, especially in Bet Shemesh. We've been to Jerusalem, we've been to various cities like Ashkelon, Ashdod, and various other places also. Elad, Bnei Brak. So that's another thing we're trying to target on at the moment and explore more on. Also on this channel, we record videos on the Parshat Shavua, Wisdom for Shabbat. We do short tidbits to inspire the Shabbat table every single week. That's another thing that we are working on at the moment. So friends, subscribe at the moment to the channel. Now, if you feel anyone's interested in watching these videos, also share these videos also to other people. Now we're in the middle of Aseret Yemei Teshuvah at the moment. It's going to be in 2 days time, Yom Kippur, and Bez Hashem, we're going to go into Sukkot. So watch out for all these videos we're going to do. We're going to actually do a special video on Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, looking at it from a Sephardic lens on different halachot pertaining the 10 days of penitence. And obviously we come to Yom Kippur, we're going to come up with a special video within regards to that. Also, friends, we've already recorded about a dozen videos, separate videos on the great rabbis from Afghanistan. If you look at it, we spoke about Rabbi Gorji, we spoke about Rabbi Frati, and many of the great rabbis. So please look over those videos. It's in Stories of Tzaddikim section, where we actually concentrated on the famous Afghanistani rabbis of yesteryear. So please, everyone, subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. Wish you all a Gemar Chatzima Tova, and take care. Thank you.